Let's Get Dangerous, which is the return of Darkwing Duck, but basically fully embraces the Darkwing Duck story. Gosalyn shows up, Taurus Bulba shows up. Great episode, in my opinion. It's two-parter, but it's fantastic. But also kind of proves that in a lot of ways, DuckTales 2017 is a better Darkwing Duck show than it is a DuckTales show.
Welcome to Idiot Plot, a comedic podcast critiquing, discussing, and analyzing the media industry through reviews, debates, and historical deep dives.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special bonus episode of Idiot Plot. Life is like a hurricane today because we're going to talk about DuckTales. And I don't mean the classic show, although I'm sure it'll come out. We're going to review and discuss the 2017 reboot. I'm joined by Justin, who is going to discuss the show with me. Yep, woohoo. Alex is not here because he has not watched the show. And yeah, he hates animation, as he said on the podcast numerous times. Alex, I hope you're listening to this. But he's not a fan of the show, or at least hasn't watched the whole thing. So together, me and Justin, we're big fans of DuckTales. So we want to talk about, now that the show is done, it's on Disney Plus. We're both able to finally watch it. We're going to go in depth with our thoughts on the 2017 DuckTales reboot. In the start, Justin, I kind of want to talk about the fact that, like, you and I both are pretty big fans of the Disney Afternoon.
Oh, yeah.
And
definitely grew up on it.
Yeah, those shows are classics. I remember because when we were in college, I bought a big omnibus comic of Darkwing Duck comics that I read really quickly. And then you were over at my dorm once and you read them like in one sitting too.
Oh, yeah, because I was like, oh, these look cool. And started reading. I'm like, wow, these are really, really good.
Yeah, that was a great reboot, which was the Boom Comics run. Boom made great Disney comics in the late 2000s. They also did a DuckTales comic written by the legendary Warren Spector, but the less about that is the better. That book is terrible. But the big thing with Disney Afternoon, classic shows, especially the OG DuckTales, it reinvented Saturday afternoon cartoons. It's extremely influential, but it still holds up today. Visually, Disney needs to do that show a favor and do a remaster, because the DVDs and Disney Plus releases of that show do not do it justice.
No, they don't.
It does not look good, but much like any popular thing, they decided to reboot it. And Justin, I know for me, when I heard that they were going to reboot DuckTales, I wouldn't say I was excited, because I was concerned.
Well, I could definitely tell you I was not excited, because it's like we're at that stage where they kind of reboot old TV shows and it's not as good as the original, and it's just like, you're tainting it. But I'll fully admit I was blown away by this series.
My biggest fear with this show was that they were going to do a Teen Titans Go approach.
Yes.
And focus only on the comedy aspects of it and not on the adventures and the action
part of it.
Yeah, that made the original show so good and so memorable and timeless. And while it didn't go full Teen Titans Go, the influence of the modern action comedy cartoon was there.
I will say, though, their comedy is not as, I don't want to say stupid, but childish. There's some very well laid out jokes in this series.
Usually when it comes to specific characters, specifically Launchpad and Flintheart Glomgold come to mind when I think of the more comedic parts of the show that actually worked.
Well, for Launchpad, that worked very well. Like, even he's pretty much basically the same as he was in the original series. The twist was what they did with Glomgold, because he's pretty much different than what he was.
They made him always more like the comics, but also less like the comics. And they made him I think, into a really funny, entertaining character.
I mean, just look up Glomtails.
Glomtails is really funny. It's a super hilarious bit from the show.
I mean, I was rolling on the floor like, oh no, we ran out of money, but kids 3 through 4 will love it.
Like, it's that whole bit was so funny, and that's kind of what got me into the show, because when I started seeing because there was that image that they posted, the initial concept art, which I think is them in a Jeep driving away, I kind of had an oh no moment saying that, because it did look kind of Teen Titans Go-y. And the show does kind of have, at least visually, that vibe. It has kind of the Flash look. I did like the style, but...
Yeah, the style is actually better than I thought it was originally going to be.
What caught my attention from the first image is that they made the nephews 3 distinct characters, which we haven't actually seen in anything Disney. They've always basically been the same character, just color swapped. Mm-hmm. So they still have their own personality, was good. And then I saw the voice cast, and they were cast as adults, and that kind of had me concerned. Mm-hmm. That it was.
I mean, I thought it was a great cast. I still think it's a great cast, but it's like I wasn't sure how the nephews' voices would work.
I thought at the day-to-day it worked. Mm-hmm. I thought at the end of the day, like I saw the pilot because he had the 1-hour pilot special. I think it's called Woohoo. It was everywhere. It was on YouTube. I mean, this show.
It's still on YouTube
because this show had so much excitement going forward that Disney wanted people to see it. They had a lot of money. I think it aired like for 24 hours in a row on Disney XD.
I'm looking at this first concept art you're talking about, and honestly, the only character that really looks like they've changed up was Webby.
Let me get the.
She looks very much more girly in this concept art.
Yeah. The show was in production for a very long time. I think it was announced a couple years before it came out. Mm-hmm. Donald also has a different design, too. I can see in that.
Yeah, his hat's different.
And he's also much. They also are saying that he's a part of the show, which turned out not to really be for large portions of it.
I mean, he's more part of this show than he was the original. So,
but I think that was part of the goal with the original. But this show, and this is where it gets controversial in the initial announcements of it, is that their whole big pitch from the start was that this show was going to be more like the comics. Because DuckTales, the OG show, is really nothing like the Carl Barks and Don Rosa classic Uncle Scrooge and Donald Duck comics that ran from the 50s into the mid-2000s, which are amazing. I'll get more into them later because I do think it's important to talk about them. But that was the main pitch going in. And at some parts, I liked that I thought they did go more to the comics. Donald's in his black outfit. They're going for adventure stuff. Characters like Feathery Duck appear that have only appeared in like European comics. But at the same time, while I do like the show's writing and the characters, it does have a lot of 2010s millennial humor in it.
Mm-hmm. Especially from Dewey.
Yep, especially from Dewey. Louie's always on a smartphone. And while it's kind of funny now, I think it's going to date the show. Mm-hmm, pretty going forward. But I want to start. Let's get really deep into this, and I want to talk about season 1 of DuckTales.
Full spoilers, everybody.
Yeah, we're gonna do spoilers for a children's cartoon, but there are spoilers to be had. Season 1 starts out with a bunch of loose episodes of them going on adventures around different areas around the world, much like we remember them and remember DuckTales being, and then eventually concludes with Magica the spell returning and basically wreaking havoc.
Yeah.
Now, I really was not into this show when it first started airing. I liked it, but it wasn't keeping my interest until I saw that Magica was an endgame villain.
Yeah, I think I watched like the first 4-5 episodes, and I was just like, I'm just not feeling it, and I kind of stopped. And
that's right, because you quit until I basically told you, dude, you have to get back in on this. It's getting insane.
Mm-hmm. And then when that was the other thing, was it was hard to find because the time they were always changing the times and when they were releasing, but finally when they came out on Disney Plus, it was like they're all here. I'm gonna watch them.
And that's something I want to talk about later with the success of the show. What was the air date? But with season 1, I mean, it was hard to keep up, and they did change it quite a bit because I think they just had a hard time finding its groove. Because I noticed with this show that the audience that loved it is people like us. I haven't heard of many kids actually liking the show very much. Mm-hmm. And season 1, I kind of understand why. Season 1 is not great.
It's very disjointed.
Yeah. It tries to do too many things at once. It's trying to set up stuff. The characters aren't fully formed. I find the characters to be more annoying than I do endearing.
And the other problem is, like, from the creator's mouth, they're like, season 1 is Dewey's story, season 2 is Louie's story, and season 3 is Huey's story. Sometimes you focus too much on one of the nephews and you don't get the group dynamic as much.
And that's actually an issue that the show has, I think, especially later on, is the lack of a group dynamic. And there's some really good episodes in season 1. I did like Jaws with the money shark.
I like the golfing one. That was fun.
Sky Pirates in the Sky is really good.
Yeah, and that was the other fun thing about the show is all the nods to all the other Disney afternoon shows. And when you see Don Knaj show up, you're like, oh, this is something big.
Yeah, and the way they tweak them becomes good. It starts out good, but kind of gets pretty iffy later on. I felt.
Yeah, by season 3, I definitely agree.
But Gizmo Duck shows up in season 1, and I wish they might have cast someone different than Lin-Manuel Miranda as Gizmo Duck, but what they do with the character, I really like.
I thought he was pretty good. They had the Secret Agent 22 episode.
Yeah, we have Secret Agent Ludwig von Drake, another underused
character. The show needed more of him.
But the show's main overarching plot is Magica De Spell, who's now a shadow after her fight with Scrooge McDuck. You know her. She's one of the main villains of the original show. She's back, but she's, for the most part, in like this mysterious shadow form where she's controlling her niece, Lena Duck, who's a new character, or Lena Spell, or just Lena, I think, for most of it, who I didn't like for the majority of the series. I don't like what they did with Lena. I like how they had Webby with Lena, because I do like what they did with Webby a lot.
Yeah, their dynamic was really well. I didn't like her much in the first season, but the second season I liked pretty much everything they did afterwards.
Yeah, see, season 1, because she's the conflicted character that's supposed to be evil but wants to be good. We've seen it a ton of times, and it doesn't really do anything different, I'd say.
Yeah, nothing you haven't seen before.
Yeah. Eventually, they do, because eventually Magica comes back in full form, and we get the finale, the Shadow War, which is really good. It's a really good finale.
And it's the best you're going to see of Magica De Spell.
Yeah. It's as good as they're gonna get. She's actually a threat, which she never was in the original show, but she's actually dangerous. We get an amazing moment where we get to hear Donald Duck's real voice, voiced by Don Cheadle,
which was great.
It's extremely funny. But even then, at the end, Magica, who's now this big evil threat, loses her powers and becomes the Magica we always know, and they still nail that part too.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just looking at the schedule, and we're totally skipping probably the second best episode of the season, the last Crash of the Sun Chaser, where, because throughout this whole thing they're trying to the nephews are finding clues to their mother, and you get a great scene at the end where Scrooge is by himself, and just the emotions you feel for a kid's cartoon. You're like, why am I feeling like this?
But that's what the comics always were. And that's the big mystery that is big in season 2, is the return of Della Duck, who I'm pretty sure that it's a rule in Disney comic storytelling that you can't talk about Della. I think that's a rule, or at least a rule that they've put on themselves, that Della and the reasons why that the nephews are with Donald can never be explained. Mm-hmm. And it's a rule that they break, and it works, because you're right, that is the big mystery. Dewey's looking for his mom. They think it's the spear of Selene, which is this Greek god that they make up. They realize that it was a ship that she went to the moon, and that Scrooge McDuck felt awful about losing her. Grief plays a big role in the show, and it's really great.
Well, I remember, I think I saw one episode where they were finding clues about their mom, and before I stopped watching it the first time, and I was like, yeah, they're probably not going to go anywhere, because you had told me it was a rule that they don't really talk about Della Duck or do anything with her, but I was kind of blown away that they actually talked about her and brought her into the show.
It was a really ballsy move that played really well with what they were doing, because now we're on the season 2, which the show was at a whole other level in season 2. Mm-hmm. I mean, the season 2, you had the Battle of Duke Bologna, which is a really funny episode.
The town where everyone's nice, where you get the 3 habaneros.
Three caballeros, I think. Yeah, 3 caballeros. Starkleys and Duckburg. Starkleys is a great character that the show used perfectly.
I love that his main thing is like he's Donald's best friend, and he's like always happy to see Donald, and Donald's just like, I don't want to be near you.
It's such a funny dynamic that isn't annoying. Like that was the big thing with season 2, is all the bits I thought were annoying. Lena, a lot of the kids' mannerisms, they're no longer annoying. They're actually really good.
The writing staff toned them back a little bit.
Went out of their way. You have Whatever Happened to Della Duck, which is fantastic episode. It reveals how she's on the moon. It's a pretty insane episode, because she loses a leg, which is pretty big for a children's cartoon.
I mean,
it uses
pretty ballsy of them too to let.
It was the show was dark. It uses the moon theme from the DuckTales video game, which is one of the greatest pieces of music written for a video game ever. It uses it as like a lullaby that she told the kids. Like and that builds up to the overarching plot of the season, which is the McDucks versus the moon and the moon people, and that's our start. You have more Lena episodes where it introduces Violet Saberwing, who's another new character who, again, I didn't really like at first, but I started to kind of grow on her a little bit.
It kind of sucked that they didn't use her as much as later on.
Mm-hmm. Outlaw Scrooge McDuck, which brings in John D. Rockerduck. I love that.
The Last Christmas, which you got Scrooge hanging out with the ghosts of like Christmas past, present, and future, and just time skipping.
Like, I'm looking through all these episodes of season 2, and they are the best episodes of the series consistently.
The 87-cent solution, that one was fun. Just Scrooge going, like, we finally got to see Scrooge like he was in the old show, where he goes crazy when he's missing just like not even like $1 of his massive fortune.
We have a Doomsday Vault and things like Dilla Duck. We have the Gandra D episode where we have Mega Beaks, which Mark Beaks is probably one of the only new villains that's truly great.
What was funny is like the first episode he was in, I really did not like him. But then he kind of comes back every once in a while. It's like, I'm kind of starting to like you as a villain.
The Dangerous Chemistry of Gandra D is the one where I really started to like him, because that was the one with Mega Beaks. Mm-hmm. I mean, basically Mark Beaks is like Mark Zuckerberg as a bird villain. He's like the new kind of billionaire to go up against Uncle Scrooge's classic kind of robber baron type of billionaire. It's a really good dynamic. Eventually they make him kind of more of an idiot, but that also works too.
Mm-hmm. Arguably one of the best episodes of the entire series, the Duck Knight Returns.
This is one that I want to focus quite a bit of time on. Mm-hmm. I want us to kind of go through the rest of the season, and I want to circle back to Dark Knight Returns.
All right.
Because Dark Knight Returns is, I think, one of the most important episodes of the series. We have Happy Birthday, Doofus Drake, which I love what they did with Doofus.
Oh, yeah.
He was like their friend in the OG
he was like
show.
A nerdy friend next door or whatever that they had, and then they turned him into this
complete psychopath.
Yeah.
Who's like super rich, like has like enslaved his parents. That
was
episode.
Probably the best joke of that episode was like, so what's it like working for him? It's like, and who are you? Oh, I'm his father. Ooh.
You have Whatever Happened to Donald Duck, which is one of the good Donald Duck episodes. Donald really doesn't have a lot of time to shine in this show, but that episode is really good.
Oh, you learn that Donald's going to therapy for his anger management.
Like it's like Donald's just trying to be a good uncle and be a good caretaker. It's actually kind of sweet.
A Nightmare on Kilmore Hill. That's probably my favorite Lena episode. That's when they're in the dreams and everything.
Yeah, that one's really good. Magica messing with Lena is one of the better parts of her character. Mostly because Catherine Tate's performance as Magica is fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
I hated her in The Office, but she's great in this show. You have the Golden Army of Cornelius Coote, which I love Cornelius Coote. I love the Cootes. Typhoon, Glom Tales, which we talked about. Glom Tales is one of the funniest episodes of the show, where it's him teaming up with all the villains of the series, like the Beagle Boys, which they do great with the Beagle Boys. Margot Martindale as Ma Beagle is fantastic.
Yeah.
Great voice acting. But Galantos is about them trying to
put all their money together to beat Scrooge because Glomgold's in a competition with him.
But then they realize that Flintheart Glomgold's not really his name. And
baloney.
And he doesn't actually win. Like Glomgold is such an idiot that it makes it hilarious. And then Louis becomes the richest duck in the world, but gets attacked by Bombi the zombie, who's a classic comic character, which I like that they used him. And that eventually he gives the fortune back, and we get Moon Invasion, which is the finale, which is the Duck family versus the army of the Moon people who are trying to take out Earth. Fantastic finale, great action sequences, great tension, really good resolution. I mean, it was a perfect cap on the season.
Well, it was also fun because you got to see all the nephews and their parallels with all their other uncles and cousins or whatever that we've met throughout the seasons.
Manny, Gearloose. I mean, there's so many characters we haven't really touched on, which is an issue that the show had, especially...
I was going to say, it's both a positive and a negative that the show had.
Especially in season 3, where the character balance becomes too much for the show to handle, and characters disappear and reappear with no real rhyme or reason. It's not great.
I think the problem with season 3 is that they sent out that poster with all the characters that you're going to see in this season. Had we not seen that, I think we'd look more fondly on this season because we're expecting a grander scale, them to be in multiple episodes, not just one each, basically. And then
before we go on to season 3, I want to circle back to Duck Knight Returns, because this is one of the standout episodes of the show. It was pretty divided fan response. This was the episode where I went to Justin and was like, dude, you need to watch the show. So in this universe, Darkwing Duck exists as a show within the show. It's not real. It's a TV show, basically old school Batman, where Darkwing is an actor, played Jim Starlin, who's voiced by Jim Cummings, who voiced Darkwing in the original series. But in this one, Drake Mallard is an actor who's going to reboot Darkwing Duck, and the whole plot is
they're making a more gritty reboot of Darkwing, and he was not asked back, and he's trying to con his way into being in this movie.
And Launchpad and him try and stop the movie from getting made. It ends with this big, really kind of uncomfortable fight. It's actually pretty intense, where it's believed Starling dies, and then Drake Mallard decides to actually become the real Darkwing Duck superhero, whereas Jim Starlin is revealed to be Negaduck. And
after I saw that, I was like, I want more.
It's mind blowing. I was watching it because it's a really dark episode of a kid's show.
It was even funny.
It's pretty effed up.
Watching the show is you slowly I was slowly like, man, Jim Cummings is really getting into Negaduck here. I'm like, what is going on? And then that reveal at the end, you're like, oh, that's why.
Except spoiler alert, they never actually do anything with that. Negative never returns, and that I think hurts the episode. But the big thing I want to focus on this episode is, as I'm sure you know this, I've talked a lot about. I'm a huge fan of the Scrooge McDuck comic books. Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck was one of the first comics I ever read as a kid. I fell in love with it. I own 2 versions of it. One, I own the newest release, and then I own the older release from 2009, which I have autographed by Don Rosa, who's the writer and artist, comic genius, masterpiece of a story, and probably the biggest enemy that this show had. I'm a member of his Facebook group, and he went off on this show mostly, and I actually had the pleasure of talking with Mr. Rosa at a convention that he was at, and we talked about this show for a little bit. And his big issue to me was that they claimed that this was going to be more like the comics, and it wasn't. And I get it, because in some ways it is like the comics. It's like they took parts from the comics and then readapted them differently. So they weren't really adapting stuff from the comics. They were more almost taking shit, not necessarily plagiarism, but just taking bits and pieces and calling it homages, which for Rosa kind of sucked because he wasn't getting paid for any of that. Like, the show used his designs quite a bit, and he didn't see a cent from the show as per his agreements with Disney. That's just how the comics world works, people. It's not glamorous. It's not great. You work your ass off and you don't really make any money from it. And that's why Don Rosa quit. But we talked about the show, talked about his issues with it. I watched a few episodes. He called it nonsense, which, especially if you watch the first 5 episodes, I can see why you would think that. They're not that great. But watching Dark Knight Returns, I wondered if the DuckTales writing staff was commenting on Don Rosa and his very public criticisms of the show, because they're all fans. Mm-hmm. They love his work. That's why they're doing this. I mean, like I said, they use his designs. Like, Scrooge's parents show up. They kind of butcher that a little bit, just because in this they live forever, where in Don Rosa's comics his parents die, and their deaths is some of the most important moments of the story. But it's kind of played up for cheap laughs in this. But they clearly took all of his bits and were students and fans of his work. And the big thing with Dark Knight Returns is that Drake Miller is a really big fan of Jim Starlin and is doing this out of love for Darkwing Duck. And that Jim Starlin goes crazy and tries to sabotage it. And I always wondered, if we were watching it, if Dark Knight Returns was the
response.
It was DuckTales staff responding to Don Rosa's complaints. And basically, I guess maybe saying he's become the villain. I don't think he went that far. I don't think he was that malicious. I mean, people were asking him his opinion because this was his work being adapted. Mm-hmm. I mean, one of his most famous quotes, someone asked him if he wants to see Life and Times of Scrooge adapted into a movie or a TV show, and his response was, "I'd love to. The only problem is Disney would make it."
And he probably wouldn't get any money from it, mm-hmm. and they'd probably butcher it.
Yeah, and that was always his concern. And really, and if you talk about DuckTales as an adaptation of the comics, he's right. It's a butcher adaptation. You have to separate it. You cannot see it as one or the other, or as adaptation of the other. Just even though that's what the creators have said
or claim, yeah,
that's not what it is. And once I separated that in my head, I was able to enjoy it a lot more. But I can see. And I hope Don Rosa Group doesn't see this, but if they do, I kind of want to other people's feedback on it. That they're calling out Don Rosa. I think some of their points make sense, but I also think that they're going a little bit far.
It's not one party. Both parties are kind of at fault here.
Yeah. I love Don Rosa, very nice man. Our conversation and encounter was kind of awkward, but he's still a very nice guy. He loves his fans. He just loves talking to his fans. he's not at all like Jim Starlin. But I can kind of see if you made something and your hero said it wasn't good, that you would feel bad.
Well, they always say never meet your heroes.
But that's my big thing on Dark Knight Returns. That why I wanted to focus on it quite a bit is that I think Dark Knight Returns to me plays really big into the whole comics versus the show debate. Especially with the Barks and Rosa Duck people and DuckTales. I mean, at Don Rosa's booth, he had a sign saying, "This is not DuckTales," which I thought was really funny because I almost wore my DuckTales shirt when I met him, and I'm really glad I didn't.
You ran like leave.
Well, it was already kind of awkward because I was nervous. I was afraid. Like, this guy is the reason why I got into writing stuff and got into like storytelling and comic books in general. And I have autism, so when you have that combined with meeting your hero, it's not
just meeting it like any famous people is kind of nerve-wracking.
Yeah, but I think it's important because, and Americans don't know, in Europe, Disney Ducks are a huge freaking deal. I mean, they're the Marvel superhero comics of Europe. I mean, they are huge. Don Rosa is a celebrity over there. When he goes into the signing, there's a line around the block to see him. Yeah, like they're this huge big deal, which is part of why this show kind of is how it is because they want it to be big in Europe, and it was pretty big in Europe. I think it has like a different voice cast in the UK.
Oh wow!
Not all of them, but a lot of them have different voice actors. It's a big deal to do a Disney Duck thing in Europe, and I think they wanted to appeal to that. I don't know how successful they were, but I mean, if they really wanted to appeal to them, then they shouldn't have done DuckTales. They should have just done a new adaptation of Scrooge and Nephews. But I digress. I'm sure I'll bring up the comics more in this discussion when I need to, because that's the other big thing too that comic book fans have had done on this topic is specifically some of the designs, especially Flintheart Glomgold and Goldie. Did not like what they did because Goldie is one of the biggest, most important parts of the classic Scrooge canon. The relationship between Scrooge and Goldie in the show is like they're like rival adventurers. In the comics, it's more Goldie represents what Scrooge's life would have been if he was willing to settle down and not pursue total riches.
So kind of like the what is it called? The Christmas Story or whatever.
Kind of, yeah. Like, yeah. I'd say so. I'd also say that she's also his Rosebud. Okay. Referencing Citizen Kane, like that's the big thing is the thought of what his life could have been haunts him, and they don't do any of that in this show, and that was a big issue people had because it felt disrespectful. It felt like they were using her to do a typical strong woman character when they could have used her differently.
Yeah, she kind of seemed like a Catwoman kind of character to Scrooge's Batman.
I still like what they did with her. I mean, Allison Janney is perfect casting.
Oh yeah, a lot of her episodes were a lot of fun.
Yeah, they really good episodes, and that's what I'm saying. Separating the comics from the show, you're able to see like, hey, is this like the comic? No, but they still did a really good job with Goldie. Like I'm still enjoying it regardless, and I think that's really important with a show like this. With something, at least to me, is very
well. That's important. What you always have that issue when you adapt something that's already it's like DC and Marvel. Like fans get mad that they don't do stuff from the comics. It's like you can't always do everything from the comics.
And then with DuckTales especially, because now you're dealing with the DuckTales fans and the Duck Comics fans, which are two complete different fan groups. There's some intersection, but for the most part, they're pretty separate. Because DuckTales fans are like millennials, like millennial Americans, and the Duck Comics fans are like older Europeans, and I guess there's some younger ones too. It's a generational thing. I've noticed, but you have to kind of appease both. And honestly, I think they did as a good job as they could, especially when they're trying to modernize the story. I think some of their attempts at modernizing it have dated it. Like a lot of the stuff that I think the nephews say and do is going to seem really dated.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Pretty soon, but like obsession with soda, cell phones, like
the Ottoman Empire show.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. It's not going to age well. Whereas the old DuckTales show is, at least from a story perspective, still flawless. Like it's still there. Yeah. It's timeless. But now we're on to season 3, which is one of the more, I won't say controversial, like Justin alluded to earlier, they promoted it with this giant poster that had all the characters that were going to show up, and it looked epic. And the big thing with this show is that there's going to be tons of crossovers finally with other Disney afternoon shows, not just Darkwing Duck.
Or Don Carnage.
Yep, we're Don Carnage. We're getting the Wuzzles. We're getting Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. We're getting Goof Troop. We're getting...
Tailspin. More
Tailspin. The only one we didn't really get is Gummy Bears.
We got that in season 1, though.
We did?
Yeah, the episode where Agent 22 one, where they're going after Heron and the gummy berry juice, basically.
That's right. Yeah, you're right. There's gummy berry juice. But that also reflects a lot of the problems with the references to Disney afternoon shows, that they are so small you would miss them in a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's one we got that I'll wait till later to mention that I was surprised we got, which was awesome.
I'm actually not quite sure which one you referred to, so I can't wait to see what it is. But we have Challenge of the Senior Junior Woodchucks, which sets up the whole season, which is them trying to find the lost treasures, while Fowl, which is a great plot twist, at the end of season 2, it's revealed that Scrooge's board of directors at his company, the Vultures, which is a funny joke that the Vultures are the accountants, but that they're actually Fowl, the evil group from Darkwing Duck. Like that blew me away.
Well, yeah, and then we had Heron with them. We were getting Steelbeak. Mm-hmm. I mean, that whole list, I was like, ooh, next season. Blot, it was going to be fun.
Like OG Mickey Mouse Phantom Blot, that had me excited. But you have Challenge to which that's everything. They're looking for these lost treasures, and you're fighting Fowl at the same time, which leads into Quack Pack, which is a reference to a bunch of different... I mean, Quack Pack is a reference to a Disney afternoon show, which was not very good. It was the nephews as teenagers, and it's not a great show.
That was basically the first thing we stated, like, this is probably the first time we've seen nephews with different personalities. I think that was actually the first one.
It might have been, but they weren't that unique.
Yeah, they weren't that unique.
Because they were all still lazy teenagers. With this show, Huey is like super neurotic. Dewey is kind of like lazy and crazy, and Louie is the laziest, but also like kind of a sleazy get rich quick guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Quack Pack was very. I kind of liked it. It kind of didn't. Just because basically they're kind of like in a sitcom show.
That's the classic. That's classic DuckTales.
Yeah, they're all wearing their classic outfits basically.
And then you have Gene the Genie from DuckTales the movie shows up,
voiced by Jaleel White.
And then Goofy shows up in his Goof Troop costume. It was almost too much for me.
The thing that sucked about that was Goofy never showed up again. Mm-hmm. But he was there at the end of the episode, which was the weird part. So like, oh, we might still get more of him.
But nope, it was just because sitcoms have guest stars, and it could have been a really, really fun episode that almost seemed to me like it existed only for fan service. Because you can find a video online of Comic-Con when they announced all the different characters that were appearing. People were losing their minds. But I think if people knew how they were going to be used, they'd be so upset. And the next episode proves that, because you have Double O Duck and you only crash twice, which Double O Duck, for people that don't know, was the original concept behind Darkwing Duck. It was going to be called Double O Duck. It was going to be about Launchpad as a spy.
This is probably one of my favorite episodes of the season.
See, I like this episode, except for one thing, and that's the reference to Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers.
Yep. Again,
they show up for like 30 seconds just to say that they're there, because they just as like foul lab animals, which is kind of neat that they're like lab rats.
Using the ray to see if they could enhance intelligence.
But then they basically just show up. The theme song plays. They get in their little airship. They break out and they leave, and that's all you see of them until a brief cameo in the series finale. That was really upsetting to me, because that could have been if they would have given Chip and Dale the Darkwing Duck treatment, it would have been fantastic. Mm-hmm. But instead, it's almost not even worth putting them in there, because it doesn't add anything. Or at least keep it with the scene where you have Gadget growing intelligence.
Yeah.
But to have that little bit of them escaping in the ship is just, I know some fans probably loved it. I was disappointed. I thought it could have been more.
Well, that, and you barely got to see Monterey, Chip, or Dale. It was mostly Gadget.
Mm-hmm. Next up, we have Lost Harp of Nirvana, which I liked this episode quite a bit. Mm-hmm. It was a really fun one.
I will say one thing about this season. They had some awesome meme templates come out of this season.
Which one came from this one?
Donald's just kind of relaxing and chilling, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, they're trying to like piss Donald off and it doesn't work, and they finally say like, we don't like your cooking or something, and all of a sudden it's just break open. And like,
that's right, that is like a meme template. Then you have Louise 11, which introduces Daisy Duck into the show, which I love what they did with Daisy. Daisy and Donald in this show deserved more.
Yes, they did. They only got 2 episodes.
Yeah, they did not get a lot, but what they did with them was really good.
I thought the way they introduced her was great.
Yeah, fantastic. Donald because there's a big moment where Donald's singing and everyone else is like mortified with how bad his voice is, but Daisy's actually able to listen and hear his actual
she loves the way his voice sounds.
Yeah, it's super sweet. It's really well done, and it's underused, much like everything in this season. Astro Boy, which I did not like.
No,
that might be the worst episode of the series. It
was kind of fun, but I didn't see much of the point of it.
There's a character in the show called Boy. He's a robot boy that befriends the nephews. This is like a Gyro episode. It's not great. Trying to be Astro Boy, it's not very good. You have the Rumble for Ragnarok, which is really fun.
Dewey can't accept that he has to be the villain.
I love the wrestling stuff that they do. It's pretty fun, because I started hate watching wrestling at the same time. It was really fun seeing them kind of play off the tropes. You have the Phantom and the Sorceress, which brings us Phantom Blot, voiced by Giancarlo Esposito. That's actually, I liked the episode quite a bit. The end's a little bit much, but I did like the majority of the episode.
Yeah, where all of a sudden Lena gets new powers and turns into this blue fairy. I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah, that was a little weird. To put a Moonlander on the Earth, that was actually kind of a fun episode, but much like a lot of episodes, it doesn't really mean anything in the greater sense of the story. It's just more. It
was fun watching Penumbra just like kind of watch Webby and Dewey feeding ducks, and she's like looking back and forth like, what?
It's a fun episode. It's just, and this kind of ties up some loose ends from the original season 2 finale. But like, it's not.
I think it was a little too late.
Yeah, it should have been earlier in the season.
It should have been like episode 3 or something.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, you have the Halloween one, which is the Trickening, which I think was very good. You have the Forbidden Fun of the Forever Glades. I like this one quite a bit.
Now this one's interesting because with the finale, it kind of I don't know if they're kind of foreshadowing here with the way Webby acts in this episode.
That's true. That is true. I also just like John D. Rockerduck as a character, and I'm really glad that he got.
Yeah. It was also interesting because this one deals with aging and de-aging. You got to see Dewey actually grown up into like a teenager.
Mm-hmm. And then you have probably one of the more notable episodes of the show, Let's Get Dangerous, which is the return to Darkwing Duck, but basically fully embraces the Darkwing Duck story. Gosalyn shows up, Taurus Bulba shows up. Great episode, in my opinion. It's 2-parter, but it's fantastic, but also kind of proves that in a lot of ways, DuckTales 2017 is a better Darkwing Duck show than it is a DuckTales show.
Yeah. My only problem with this episode was, and I think this was because they probably knew that they were coming to an end, is all the villains that they brought out of the other universe didn't stay in this universe, so we didn't get to see them later down the line.
And it sets up a Darkwing storyline that we're never going to get because I know they're rebooting Darkwing Duck, but from what I've heard, it's not going to be based off of this iteration.
I really liked what they did with Gosling.
I want to see more of this Darkling. I really do. You have Escape from the Impossible, which is, these next few episodes are kind of filler, in my opinion.
Yeah, Impossible was kind of fun, just watching Scrooge, Louis, and Miss Beakley trying to get out of the vault.
You have the first adventure, which is really good. The fight for Castle McDuck, which is a controversial one because I'm reading the story actually now, the one that this is kind of based off of, which is Scrooge returning to the castle and confronting his sister Matilda, except Matilda's not his youngest sister. That's Hortense, which is Donald's mom. But that one is more about, this one's more like childish family squabbles. When in the comic, it's more Scrooge kind of screwed his family over and they aren't speaking terms. It's about them kind of regaining some sort of peace.
Yeah. In this one, it seemed like they kind of made it seem like his sister screwed him over.
Yeah, it's not great, but it's okay. How Santa Stole Christmas is fantastic.
Oh yeah, that was fun.
That's a really good episode. Beats in the Shell it's okay. I know you have some pretty strong opinions on the last cargo of Kid Cloud Kicker.
Yeah, this one just kind of was disappointing because it's like I didn't like Kid Cloud Kicker's voice, and they just kind of made him seem like a bumbling idiot, which he wasn't really in Tailspin.
Yeah, it's not.
Basically, they made him Baloo.
Yeah, they really should have. And again, it sets up more stories we're not going to get.
Well, that and what's the other character? She wasn't even in
Molly.
This episode. Yeah, Molly didn't show up till like the end, and it's like, wow, that was kind of a waste.
It feels like we're getting cheated. It feels like we're getting cheated a little bit with his cameos. But then you have the life and crimes of Scrooge McDuck, which I thought was fantastic, and I thought
especially the backstory with
Magica.
Yeah,
that was
her brother. I was like, wow.
That was amazing. That was a truly like good moment. I would call that like a comics worthy moment.
Mm-hmm.
Where you get that hard emotion, that really just good storytelling that drives these characters. I wish we saw more Scrooge and Magica.
Especially when Magica's actual threat, because she was a threat for like an episode, and then after that it was she's just back from the show, and it's like I want to see more of her as an overpowered villain.
But then we're at the finale, the last adventure, which is where Fowl does their best master plan. You get more comic references with May and June, who are revealed to be Webby clones, because Webby herself. I'm just going to spoil the whole thing right now. So you don't want to hear me spoil the big show. Turn off. But the big spoiler is that Webby is... I can't get a clear answer from the internet. She's either Scrooge's daughter or a clone of Scrooge.
I think she's a clone of Scrooge, but they're calling her his daughter, basically.
It's really weird, but anyway, Fowl clones Scrooge so that way they could use this magic papyrus sheet to stop Scrooge from adventuring, because Fowl hates adventuring because it's chaos. It's one of the weakest parts of this season is that the villain's plot doesn't make a ton of sense and is pretty vague, even though I do like the villain.
I did like that they made him like basically the grandson of the first adventurer whose book they're going through. It was basically like he is what the nephews are if they didn't like doing what they were doing.
There's some really good reversals in it. The actual third act of the finale is really good. The final fight between Buford Buzzard and Uncle Scrooge, it's really good.
Now this is where that Disney Afternoon other reference I didn't think we'd ever get came into play, and that's the gargoyle reference.
What was the gargoyle reference? I think I missed that.
That was where the Manny the horse gets his head back on, and it's the voice of the same guy, and he's like, "I live again."
That's right. It's Keith David. Shit, you're right.
They play the music from the opening, and I'm like, oh my god, they're doing it. I'm like, this is one I did not think we would get.
I did not. I did not see that as a Gargoyles reference. Shit, I feel stupid now. But I'm glad they did that. But I think the big issue with the finale is they needed more episodes.
Yeah, it feels way too rushed.
Especially the big Webby twist. It's not great. It'd be really good if they actually had a season to set it up, but they don't.
Yeah, and then you had the entire of all the characters you saw throughout the season are locked up somehow.
And don't join them in the big final battle, which is a waste. And I guess that's most of the episodes. I kind of rushed through it because we're taking a long time, but that's the big key thoughts. The finales overall were pretty good, even though I wasn't super impressed with the series finale. It was still a good finale. It just needed
very good moments. It
needed just a little bit
how you kind of wanted it.
I mean, the Webby twist, I think, was always supposed to be there because Webby's big goal for the whole series is to become a McDuck, and she loves the McDucks, and she wants to be a McDuck.
And she's learning everything about them.
And there's the big revelation that she was a McDuck the whole time. Her being Scrooge's clone, daughter, whatever, is bizarre, and I wish we got more set up with that. Especially because it's supposed to be Huey's season, yet the very last reversal makes it Webby's, and that's kind of the strange.
Even with it being Huey's season, there's not a lot of episodes that focus on Huey.
Yeah, they clearly knew that Disney was going to axe them, and they needed to get to their end. And that was the big thing with this show. That's a big thing to talk about is actually before we get that, I want to touch upon what I think is the strongest aspect of this show, and I think that's the characters and the voice acting.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, other than a couple of the other characters that showed up, like Cloud Kicker, I can't really complain about any of the voice actors they picked for the roles.
Now, nobody will ever replace Alan Young. He is the perfect Scrooge voice.
Yep.
But David Tennant does his damnedest.
Yeah, he I mean, I didn't like him, but as the seasons went on, he kind of started to grow on me.
He actually learned how to play Scrooge, I think, a lot more as the series progressed. Early on, he sounded too much like David Tennant, and eventually I heard Scrooge.
Yep.
Again, he's not as good as Alan Young in my opinion, but he's still very good.
I wasn't too sure on Ben Schwartz, Danny Pudi, and Bobby Monahan as the nephews, but they after halfway through the first season, they started to find their groove and their roles and play really well.
Kate Micucci as Webby is great. Tux
Bennett as Launchpad McQuack is perfect.
Yo, he's fantastic. Yeah, Tux Ala Gundoye. I butchered that.
We're sorry. As Miss Beakley is.
I'm
great.
sorry, but she was great. Okay, don't take it as an insult. I loved you in this show.
I loved what they did with Beakley in this show.
Yeah, making her a spy, perfect.
I'm kind of disappointed that we didn't get more of the butler as a ghost.
Yeah, that was a really good setup that they didn't really do much with.
He just shows up randomly. Although my favorite gag of that is in the Moonvasion one. He's like, "Oh, you guys are clearly gonna lose. I'll get everything prepared for you." And he goes down, and Miss Beakley's like, "I'm not sure I'm happy that he went down."
And there's some really good jokes, especially with him. But also, the big surprise of the show is Paget Brewster as Della Duck. She's fantastic. I mean, they basically could do whatever they want with Della because Della hasn't had a defined character up to this point.
I only had one problem with Della, and that was in season 2 when she shows up, because she's like the fun-loving and she gets in trouble with her sons, but then when Louis does one thing, it's like all of a sudden he's the only one getting punished. It's like, you encouraged Dewey during the safe thing, the Doomsday Vault episode, and got in there, right? Because
she was almost she was commenting at that time just because they clearly didn't really know what to do with her. Mm-hmm. because you can't be like a traditional like no fun parent, and she has to learn to be a parent. Yeah, which they address in the show and then kind of ignore. Yeah. Like pretty soon after, she never really feels like their mom. She feels more like an older sister. or not.
Yeah, or the fun ant.
Yeah, which
I liked what they did with Gyro.
Gyro was great. That was a really good reinvention of him. Jim Rash was perfect. And we touched upon this too, but the villains. Keith Ferguson as Flint Hargolom is one of the funniest performances I've seen in a show in a very long time. Catherine Tate as Magica, Margot Martindale as Maud Beagle, Eric Bauza as the Beagle Boys. They're all just really, really good.
Michael Chiklis as Zeus.
Chris Diamantopoulos as both Darkwing and Starkules.
I was a little I loved what they did with Steelbeak too, but it was also I was kind of missing the original guy's voice.
Yeah, I was too. I missed the originals in some of them because like Donald is voiced by Tony Anselmo, Daisy Duck is voiced by Tress MacNeille, so they got their original act voices back. And again, we need to talk about how Donald and Daisy end, where it's them going to go travel around the world together on a final trip, and just how sweet that is as a story mode.
Della trying to be like, no, you shouldn't do that. Should let me come along or whatever.
It's Donald just finally being happy, and it's actually pretty great.
And then they're going to take May and June along with them.
Mm-hmm. And for people that don't know, April, May, and June are like the comic book equivalences of Huey, Dewey, and Louie.
They're, what's their, just talk about her.
Yeah, they're clones of Webby in this, but they're not in the comics. But it was cool to see them in the comics.
Yeah, aren't they like
or in the show
pieces of Daisy Duck?
I'm not sure. I haven't actually read a story that has them in it, but they're part of the official character canon. But one thing I want to talk about quick before we kind of start wrapping this up that we have to talk about, because you can't talk about DuckTales and not talk about the theme song. And if there's one thing that they butchered from the original show, it's the theme song. I don't like what they did with it.
They took away the horns or something.
It was the brass. There was no brass, and the brass is the best part.
Yeah.
It needs that brass. I
did love the openings to them, though, and they slowly change as the show progresses and more characters are added.
Yeah, I would say the intro is pretty great. I just wish it had brass. Mm-hmm. Because that was the thing that everyone remembers about the Disney afternoon shows, was the super over-the-top, poorly done theme songs. Darkwing Duck, TaleSpin, Gummy Bears especially, DuckTales, and this did not have that feel. It was just missing something. Yep, I think it needed. That was something where it was like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And you could have just used the same exact one. I mean, I get why they changed it up because it's a new show, but you could have kept that. Now, I kind of want to talk about what went wrong with this show a little bit, because things did go wrong. I don't want to sit here I liked the show a lot, as you said. I don't think it was perfect. It was inconsistent, especially with season 3, with the manipulative use of Disney Afternoon. But the show was not that big of a hit. It did not do super great, I think, from what I've seen wise, but at least with views. But the big thing, if you try to watch this show week to week, it was damn near impossible. The air schedule for this show was one of the most ridiculous I've ever seen for a TV show. Well, it was season 3 alone was a weird. Well, you missed it in season 1 and 2 because you didn't really watch those on air like I did. I know. Season 1 aired in chunks and eventually ended over the course of August to December. Oh, yeah, because I have it here. Season 1 started airing in August 2017, finished in December of 2017, and then kicked back up again in May of 2018, finished in August 2018. So 23 episodes took a year to come out for one season because of a massive break in between. Season 2 started in October of 2018 and ended in September of 2019. And season 3 began airing in April of 2020 and ended March 15, 2021. Yeah, for, 26 episode seasons? It should not... 23, 24, and 22. Yeah, it should not take that long to release that many episodes. Because they would make these bits and then release them, and then there'd be like this months gaps. But when they would come back from the gaps, it'd be on a completely different time and day. Mm-hmm. That was a big issue I had with it, especially with season 2. Because
season 3 was even that. They were releasing on a Monday or Friday, and then also it switched to Mondays.
Oh, it was weirder than that, man. It was way weirder than that. First off, season 1 aired on Disney XD, season 2 aired on Disney Channel, and season 3 aired back on Disney XD. So if you had a DVR like I did, you missed a big chunk of season 3 because they switched channels and weren't super vocal about that. Then you had it aired on Saturday mornings for a little bit, then aired afternoons, and then a big chunk of season 2 aired at 6:30 in the morning on Saturday. Why is a new show airing at 6:30 on Saturday morning? And then the back half of season 2 aired over the course of like 2 weeks, 5 episodes a day, or 5 episodes a week, Monday through Friday. It was bizarre. And then season 3, like when the pandemic hit, took a massive break, which they said was planned. But at the same time, it didn't really end at a good spot for them to go into break. And it was just so frustrating to try and watch this show because I wanted to support it.
You know what this kind of reminded me of? This kind of reminds me of season 2 of Young Justice. I was watching that week to week as it was going, and basically that had the same issues as DuckTales. Is basically they kept getting pushed all over the place. All of a sudden, they weren't on the schedule anymore.
Yeah. DuckTales had that big thing like that. Like, that's Disney's fault. Whoever's in Disney programming, maybe it's on the crew too for just taking too long, which I know isn't really a fair thing to say. But I mean, some of those, I understand like Rick and Morty having long breaks, but this got frustrating, and you can't blame it having a hard time building an audience like that. Now, if DuckTales was a Disney Plus exclusive, if Disney Plus was a thing when it first came out and it aired exclusively on that, it probably would have been a massive hit.
Oh, I bet.
It would have gotten tons of viewership if it aired week to week on Disney Plus, because then airtime doesn't matter. But it certainly did with this, and the airtimes that they were picking. I mean, this show, in my opinion, should have probably aired in prime time. It probably should have aired. I think weekend nights are big for kid TV premieres, but it should have probably aired on an evening consistently, because this is a show that I know tons of adults that like this show.
Mm-hmm. I mean, get your parents. I mean, set it up for a time where parents and kids could watch it together. You'd get a hell of a lot more viewers, I'd think.
And you can see that reflected in the merchandise. They made quite a bit of toys at one time based on the show, and they were all on clearance pretty much a couple months after they came out. Like I bought not all the toys, but I bought a large number of them at Target on clearance. Like I bought, I think, all the big action figures of the main cast that they released for like $4 a pack. Mm-hmm. So I got like I got the whole cast for like under $20, and it should cost me like $60. But it's not good if a lot of these kid shows are partially funded by toy sales and licensing when that doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Kind of makes me wonder though, what is like SpongeBob on toy sales too, or because I don't remember a lot of SpongeBob toys growing up, but
there weren't a lot when it first came out, but there are certainly a lot now. But I think that's more ad revenue. I think Disney's more ad revenue too, but they want their properties to be big beyond it, because DuckTales was huge. The original was huge beyond it. I mean, the video game is regarded as one of the greatest NES games of all time. Mm-hmm. But so I think in a lot of ways, while I think DuckTales was a major success, I think it might go down as kind of a failure in that I don't think it did well financially as they hoped it would.
Well, that, and also it's going to seem kind of dated in a couple of years too.
Yeah, it does not have the original head. I applaud its ambition.
Oh yeah,
it's certainly one of the most ambitious. I mean, season 3 is super ambitious, but like we said, there's too many characters, and it kind of tumbles under its own weight because there's just too many characters for each to get their due, and they really try.
I will say I was pleasantly surprised with this show. I expected the worst, and I think we got the best.
I expected Teen Titans Go show, and I got the what I got probably as good as it was going to be. Mm-hmm. It had some Teen Titans Go type humor, had some Teen Titans Go type animation, but they tried very hard to get that story down,
to not be so
get the adventures and have it be an adventure story. Now they did have a reel apparently called No Minecart Chases for finales and stuff, which I kind of wish the show had more of. I wish it had more of that classic adventure stuff a little bit, but I still think it was a damn good show. And I know we shit on Disney quite a bit on here. And I know even with this, I'm not super keen on Disney and how they treated Don Rosa and some of the Disney comic stuff. But they gave these people a lot of creative freedom, and they made a show, because like action cartoons just don't sell. Animation people tell you that kids don't like action cartoons anymore. But this one was mildly successful. Like I said, I think adults like it more than kids do, but
probably
just for how revered the original show is. But Justin, if you had to pick a best episode, what would you say?
Probably the Duck Knight Returns.
That's probably. I want to say that one, but I was so upset that it didn't go anywhere with Negaduck that
either that or Glomtails, I would think.
Glomtails is pretty great, or even like just the Moon finale was really good. But Glomtails was really funny.
I'm trying to think if there's another one I'd be like, yeah, it's really.
I do really like Life and Crimes of Scrooge McDuck. That one's up there.
Yeah, that one's up there.
But this is the thing, like it's hard for us because there's lots of good episodes. So I would recommend it. It's not your same traditional DuckTales. If that's what you want, then it's on Disney Plus. Rewatch the original. But if you want something a little bit more modern, a little bit more new,
something a little different, a little more modern,
it's a good show. It's a fun show. I don't think it's perfect. Especially character balance, like for a show called DuckTales where Scrooge doesn't appear in like a third of the episodes is kind of blasphemous.
Yeah,
and that's what happens.
And that's part of the problem with the show as well, is there's a lot of episodes where the group is just not all together going on adventures.
And I can kind of see why they wouldn't want to shackle themselves to that format, but that's kind of what I came to see.
Yeah, and you get some episodes where it's basically just them coming back from finding a treasure, and it's like, but I want to see how they got to the treasure and everything else.
That's why I'm here. Well, and especially like, and I guess that's probably why I wasn't big fan of the Lena episodes. So I'd be like, adventure, Lena. Like they're good episodes, but I want to see DuckTales. I want to see what I expected, which is the DuckTales show. And looking back, yeah, they're really good episodes. Well, and yeah, I should have been more patient. And I should have been kinder to them. But at the time, when winning week by week for episodes, sometimes months between episodes because of how ridiculous the release schedule was, and what I get isn't DuckTales, like it isn't Sweet Adventures, I feel kind of cheated.
Well, and as much as I'm just looking through the episodes again, as much as we shit on the first couple episodes, those were more like the original show where they're going on adventures to the casino, up the mountain, into Egypt.
It's just clear that it's not necessarily what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
They
got away from it and they stayed away from it, and
yep,
that was
and that's for good and for bad.
Yes.
Because there's some really good storylines away from it, but also you kind of wish that there was more of it, because that's kind of what you wanted. That's kind of what you expected. I know the thing of like, curb your expectations, don't be such a fanboy purist. There could be new things. And I appreciate what's new. I like what's...
I also appreciate what's old, too.
Yep. I wanted to see modern versions of classic adventure type stories, especially when they're promising more stuff from the comics, and they really go away from that style of storytelling. I mean, heck, I'm looking right now on the Wikipedia page. Don Rosa is on the Wikipedia page, last part of critical reception, saying that the DuckTales reboot series bears virtually no resemblance whatsoever to Bach's original comics. So it's on Wikipedia that the dude wasn't happy with it, or not even unhappy. He just said it's not like the comics, which I don't know if that technically is a criticism.
I mean, you can take it both as a criticism and a compliment.
Mm-hmm. Because I don't think it needs to be like the comics. They shouldn't have said it was,
yeah.
But
Well, that was the whole thing. It was like sometimes going through these episodes, and I know you're a big fan of the comics, so you know more, and you're like, well, it's blasphemous to even mention Della Duck and stuff, and they're doing this, and I'm like, it's not like the comics then, is it?
No. And that's the issue. I wouldn't have been, because initially I was pretty like, what the hell are they doing? That's just because that they were saying this is like the comics. If they didn't say that, I really wouldn't have cared. But the fact that
Again,
they were like, this is more the comic.
It's like them showing us the poster for episode 3. I mean, I would have been mad had I not seen the poster. I would have been like, oh, there's such and such. But we did get a poster, so...
Yeah, it's not... Whoever's in charge of the marketing slogans did not do a very good job. And that's part of it. I think with Don Rosa, I think if they would have said it wasn't the comics at all, he wouldn't have given a shit. He wouldn't have cared.
Yeah.
In fact, that's what he's told me. That's what he said when I talked to him. That was his only issue with this. It was like the comics. And they lied. They lied to make people like him happy and to get the comic people on his side. And they're not. They've rejected the show. I mean, it was canceled by Disney. It got like 70-some episodes, I think, or close to it. 69 episodes, nice. which is how most Disney shows get. That's about around that range. Maybe a little bit less, but I doubt this show was that cheap to produce. So
no, and the animation was pretty good, so I doubt it was.
Yeah, so it's pretty good. But I kind of want to end this episode. We've been talking for a long time. The bonus was supposed to be short, but we went kind of in depth. But I'm okay with that because this is the only time we'll get to talk. Because Alex isn't going to ever talk about
DuckTales.
So this is the only chance we'll get to talk about DuckTales. I can talk about
the only animation thing we can get him to talk about is if we make him watch something animated or SpongeBob.
Pretty much. But that's the big thing with DuckTales is I think DuckTales is important, and a lesson that I always tell people, which is if you like a show, watch it. If you want to see more stuff like DuckTales, you need to watch DuckTales. It was on TV. You need to watch it on TV.
You need to get other people to watch it too.
Mm-hmm. That's what I did with Justin. I got him into it. Much like too, if you like this story, if you like Uncle Scrooge, if you want to see more of it, please, I implore you, read Carl Barks and Don Rosa's Uncle Scrooge stories. They're kind of hard to find now. A lot of them are actually available online digitally through Comixology. So that's a good way to start. I like having the big print versions because Fantagraphics Books, which publishes them, puts them in these very nice editions that I like just to have to display. But please read them. You help support creators that way, because that was Don Rosa's whole point of why he quit comics, why he doesn't like Disney, is just the way that they do things just to make money and how it gets in the way of storytelling. So if you like these kind of stories, please watch the shows, buy the books, don't illegally download things if you like them. That's absurd. You aren't helping people when you do that. I think DuckTales is a good example of that. If you like the stories, if you're a fan of DuckTales, please read the Don Rosa Uncle Scrooge run, the Carl Barks Uncle Scrooge run. Don Rosa's Life of Scrooge McDuck is a masterpiece. It's one of the greatest comic books ever written. It's like historical fiction with Uncle Scrooge. Like every story in it could have historically happened. Like in the timeline of Uncle Scrooge's life, it's an insanely deep and amazing accomplishment of not just comic book writing, but just storytelling in general. If you're a fan of DuckTales, please check that out. We need more Rosa fans in the U.S. But Justin, I think you probably recommend this show too.
Yep,
it's solid.
I also recommend the original as well.
Yep, it doesn't look great on Disney Plus, but it's there. It holds up surprisingly well. It's still a fun time. If you have kids, get them on the classics. It's really good. It's really good storytelling. And with that, we've been talking for a long time, so we'll let you go. Thank you for listening to the special bonus episode on DuckTales, where we ranted about more issues with Disney, but also just why we love some parts of Disney.
Well, I was going to say we also praised them.
Yeah, we praised them here. They made a good show. And they made me happy. The inner Uncle Scrooge fan, as I look at the pile of Uncle Scrooge related memorabilia that's next to me as I'm recording. They made the Scrooge fan happy.
Put it this way: is we like we like some stuff they make. We don't like other stuff they make. We're not fanboys. We're not gonna declare everything they make is great, super. If you don't like it, you're an idiot.
But when they make something I like, I'm gonna be upfront and I'm gonna admit it. If you like the show, it's on Disney Plus right now, all 3 seasons, along with the original show and the DuckTales movie. It's a pretty easy watch, 16 episodes. Go in, give it a watch if you think it sounds interesting. If you have kids, watch it with your kids. It's a really fun show for kids and parents to watch, I feel. But with that, this is a special episode of Idiot Plot on DuckTales. For Justin Neitzel, I'm David Yanish. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to us on YouTube. We're on Spotify, Anchor FM, and Google Podcasts. We're also on Facebook. Give us a like and see what we got going on. We'll see you next time.